Listen, call them what you want. Knee knockers, golden nuggets, thigh slappers, etc. But our friends at Manscaped refer to them as the boys. Now, not every man has children, including me unless you count my cats, and, well, I always do. But every man is responsible for their 2 boys below the waist. When your little guys have more hair than they need, like my cats, trust Manscaped for all your grooming dreams. Boys need love too, that's what I always say. So join the 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped by going to manscaped.com and use code PRETTYDARK for 20% off plus free shipping. You heard it here first, folks. The boys are back in town. I got my first Manscaped back in 2020, and let me tell you, it got me through those hard times. Just me, my lawnmower 3.0, my cats, a bottle of whiskey. You get the idea. A lot of nude gardening. But none of that would have been possible without the confidence that comes with Manscaped. And I haven't been the same since. The lawnmower family now includes the Lawnmower 3.0 Plus, the 4.0 Pro, and the 5.0 Ultra, which helps reduce nicks, ingrown hairs, and other grooming accidents. Yeesh. Yep, 3 ball trimmers. You better believe it. That's 3 trimmers, not 3 balls. What do you think this is? Some kind of sideshow act? Get out of here! Boys need love too, and for this reason, each trimmer is equipped with skin-safe technology, an LED spotlight so you can shave in the dark, and unique features for different grooming needs. But I gotta say it, skin-safe technology does not guarantee cut protection, don't be an idiot. But you can shave in the shower, or take it outside to shave during a summer afternoon thunderstorm, because these babies are waterproof. Summer vacay coming up? Manscaped has got you covered. These trimmers come with a travel case and even a travel lock feature to avoid any accidental powering and all those weird looks in the airport. Have you ever even seen Fight Club? 9 times out of 10, it's an electric razor, but every once in a while, it's a Manscaped lawnmower. Always imply ownership in the event of a ball trimmer. Get 20% off plus free shipping with the code PRETTYDARK at manscaped.com. That's 20% off plus free shipping with the code PRETTYDARK at manscaped.com. For the best your boys have ever looked. Trust Manscaped.
You're listening to That's Pretty Dark,
the podcast where we talk about all of the entertainment that scared us as children
and still haunts us as adults. So grab your flashlight and join us as we take a frightfully nostalgic look over our shoulders
and under our beds
and in our closets.
And together we'll realize, whoa, that's pretty dark.
Pretty dark.
Good for us, doing this 79 times.
Oh my God.
Lord have mercy.
Almost 80 times we've been here in these chairs.
80 times around the microphone.
Buzz believes it. He's in my lap right now and he believes it. He knows that I have spent all this time away from him. But now I let them in here while I record. You remember back in the day I would keep the door shut like you do? And they would just scream.
Yeah, I remember how distracting it was. It was terrible.
They used to scream a lot. Now they don't scream. They just attack me for cuddles, which is very sweet, but also distracting.
And pace in front of the computer camera.
Yeah, that too. Distract you. My name is Kaylin.
My name is Christian, and you guys are listening to That's Pretty Dark. And if any of you YouTube listeners out there noticed, Holes Part 2 never popped up on YouTube because...
by the way, guys, apologies. That is a copyright issue.
Infringement.
We probably could fix it. It would just take editing Christian some effort. So
no, I don't think so, because the copyright content that was flagged is the Spanish version of Holes.
The film.
The film Holes. Oh. The Spanish dub.
Yeah, there are a lot of sound bites in it.
So there's no getting around
of course,
that.
Hopefully this will show up on YouTube and you guys will be like, oh, wait a second, we've missed an episode. Yes, you have. If you don't use another streaming service, you can find it on our website, that'sprettydark.com. The full episode will stream there. So no worries. We don't want to leave you out. It's just YouTube did not play nice with that episode.
Yeah. I feel like it's a rite of passage. I am surprised we haven't been flagged
Knock
before.
on wood. Took us nearly 3 years. We're coming up on our 3rd anniversary.
Hey, I know my journalistic rights.
Fair use.
It's fair use law.
Commentary.
Yeah.
Just a heads up. Apologies to our YouTube listeners and our Google
Go to our website,
listeners.
that'sprettydark.com. It is August, and summer's coming to an end, and the back-to-school vibes are strong.
I always get hit really hard at the beginning of August with that, like, summer nostalgia.
Right.
Back to school. Just everything hits me super hard.
Me
and
too.
Part of it's because I have an August birthday, so it's like...
Right.
It's that coming around again, the cycle's ending and beginning, and it's all at the same time, and it's very heavy to me.
Yeah.
August is not always easy around here.
No, I get it.
But
what's good about it is that spooky season is just around the corner.
it starts earlier and earlier every year.
Earlier and earlier every year.
Great.
But before we give ourselves over to the candy and the cobwebs, we've got a very special book report that we've been talking about doing from the very beginning. This has been a long time coming.
And it's been a minute since you've done a book report.
It's true. And although the events of the novel take place between mid-October and mid-December in Connecticut, by the way, so Gilmore Girls territory,
Stars Hollow.
giving it that chilly autumn atmosphere we all need so desperately, I've always wanted to cover this book in the spirit of back to school. This is the land of book bags and being late for class, where homework is the enemy and Friday nights are king. When half days and holidays are markers in time that give everything in between that much more meaning. I'm sure it's like tenfold when your birthday's in August, and that's the marker of the new school year.
Often I would start school on my birthday.
That sucks.
Many
that
times.
blows.
Several times in
big
college
time.
too. Yep. It was usually the first. It was like in college, it'd be syllabus day, and I'd be like, yeah, happy birthday to me, I guess.
I need to forget that you said that. That's like the one year I went to Birmingham to work on a movie, and like I think our first day on set was Halloween. And I was so pissed because I was like, you couldn't wait
One
more day. I mean, you couldn't give this to me. I was very upset.
I know you felt like they personally took it from you, which is...
But I did wear my orange pants and my Jack Skellington zip-up hoodie, so I did
upside.
I did okay.
The upside is seeing people, interacting on Halloween.
Anyway, this is some real 80s and 90s nostalgia stuff here. I've been listening to so much music from this era.
90s music?
The Cure.
Yeah. Oh, The Cure. I was just listening to The Cure.
Slow Dive. The Cranberries.
I've been listening to The Cranberries all summer. I don't know what it is.
Smashing Pumpkins. It's been a really good week. So feeling 90s vibes. Every once in a while, a story comes along that represents a time and a place so perfectly, it practically infects the culture from which it originated, spilling profoundly dreadful truths as thought viruses that spread by way of whispers and nervous laughter. These terrible revelations take root in the mind of the reader, where they are watered by rumination and fed by anxiety, allowing fear to germinate and horror to grow and bloom. One such story is the novel The Face on the Milk Carton, a suspenseful young adult mystery written by Caroline B. Cooney, published in 1990. And if you're like me, you didn't read this book as a kid, but you heard plenty of people talk about it, and by the time I was in school, it had long since left its mark on kids born in the 80s, and had already evolved into something much more resembling folklore than a book for teenagers.
Yeah, that was actually what I was going to say about it. Like, this book absolutely missed me. It was not the time frame that I was inside of.
Yeah.
But I definitely feel the lore around not just this novel, but the whole campaign.
Yes.
The campaign was still active when we were kids.
It was.
But it's really that late 70s, early 80s. What else are we going to do but try to put these kids' faces in front of as many people as possible?
Right.
Missing children.
This book belongs on our show for many, many reasons, not just because it has all the page-turning suspense of the Skeleton Man, the eerie mystery of a watcher in the woods, and the cultural relevance of holes. It also has the gut-wrenching verisimilitude of Go Ask Alice. Have you ever read that book?
I have.
I think we could cover that one day. I think it belongs.
I haven't really thought about it in those terms, but yeah, we probably could.
The Face in the Milk Carton harkens back to the swirling mass of topics we covered in our very first 2 episodes, The Dark Origins of Children's Programming, and it relies on the one facet of 80s and 90s culture that has never failed to send a chill down my spine. This is the campaign you were just talking about. The haunting trend of putting photos of missing children on milk cartons in the hopes they'll be recognized by someone having their morning cereal or washing down a peanut butter sandwich in the school cafeteria. And as if it wasn't already a thrilling enough prospect that you might one day actually recognize one of the missing milk carton kids, Cooney forces the reader to confront an even more terrifying possibility.
Yeah.
What if the missing kid you recognize
Is yourself.
is yourself? Such a kick-ass concept. I mean, I'm so jealous that I wasn't there to think of it myself.
I feel like I thought about this a lot because I don't know if I've just seen documentaries where there have been kids that were abducted and they do find out later in life or maybe even into adulthood that they're not who they think they are.
Mm-hmm.
That, I can't imagine how it would rock somebody's world.
It's like a Lifetime original movie, you know?
It's not just everything around you. It's your own identity that's been taken from you.
Right.
Or modified.
And there's a really, really good chance that Cooney was inspired by a real-life event. And don't worry, guys. We're going to get to it. Tonight, let's take a closer look at the face in the milk carton to see if we might recognize it after all these years. How much does it resemble the childhood fears we once knew? Does it merely reflect the culture of stranger danger back on itself? Or does it fully embody the visage of frightful nostalgia that we've come to know so well? In many ways, it's like the Dorian Gray's portrait of children's books, aging faster than the timeless horrors it's meant to expose.
Mm-hmm.
But to get us started, let's introduce the author, Caroline B. Cooney.
Got to.
Cooney was born in 1947 in New York, but grew up in Connecticut, where she lived most of her life until she moved to South Carolina to be near family, where she still lives today. So from Cooney's website,
Caroline B. Cooney is the author of more than 90 suspense, mystery, and romance novels for teenagers, which have sold over 15 million copies and are published in several languages. The Face on the Milk Carton has sold over 3 million copies and was made into a television movie. Her books have won many state library awards and are on many book lists, such as the New York Public Library's annual Teen Picks.
And as far as I can tell, these website entries are at least a decade old,
Aww.
So I'm sure the numbers are much higher today. She also has a separate biographical page where she writes more about her childhood and growing up to be a writer. So if anybody's interested in that, like a more intimate look into her life, definitely go check that out. And she wants to hear from readers, so send her a nice message. Let her know how much you
that would be
appreciate
nice
her works.
if some of our darklings remember this book and want to say hello.
And as a foreword to my 2012 reprint of this book, Cooney writes,
Dear reader, I'm often asked where the idea came from for The Face on the Milk Carton. Over 20 years ago, I was in LaGuardia Airport. The concourse was plastered with copies of a homemade missing child poster. The little girl in the black and white photograph had been missing for 15 years. All I could think of were her parents. That mother and father had made a stack of posters and come to New York, hoping that after a decade and a half, one of the tens of thousands of people at this airport would recognize the picture and tell them where their little girl was now. But nobody can recognize an 18-year-old girl from a picture of her at age 3. I boarded my plane weeping for those parents, and then I had a thought. There's one person who might recognize that photo, the little girl herself. What an idea for a suspense thriller. A teenage girl recognizes herself on a missing child poster. This is a book about profound worry and agonizing decisions.
Profound worry and agonizing decisions.
That's
Story
my middle
of
name.
my life.
Middle name. My government name, Profound Worry. And my middle name, Agonizing Decisions. Woof. I feel like I would have had similar thoughts if I passed by that poster. Just
that desperation.
Yeah.
Like
the
the
pain
absence.
that you can feel.
Yeah.
I think about it a lot. Like any of the documentaries that we watch today, just with missing people in general, I think about it all the time. Just like the agony of not knowing where a loved one is after that long.
Mm-hmm.
Basically having no closure about whether they're still with us, even.
And not knowing is always the worst part, people say.
It's just horrific.
So this story follows the life and troubles of Janie Johnson. But who is Janie? True to the media from this time, it comes as no real surprise that Janie is extremely normal. She's just your average 15-year-old girl going about her life. A kid like you and me.
Yeah, as normal as a teenage girl can be.
Sure.
You know.
She doesn't make the best grades in school, but they're good enough for the honor society. She has a solid group of friends who eat lunch together every day. She's an only child with very present parents. She's learning how to drive, and she's technically in love with the boy next door, Reeve. But the quirks that make Janie unique are actually all either bits of foreshadowing or have very ironic payoffs at some point in the story, which I applaud Cooney for. These include her crazy red hair and her lactose intolerance. You can relate.
Yeah, very relatable. Are we talking like Pippi Longstocking hair or like...
A lot of it.
What's the vibe?
Messy.
Okay.
They call it serious hair.
Like serious hair.
Like
she's
serious
got some
hair.
serious hair.
She also feels smaller and less physically mature than the other girls. You can also
this a story about
relate.
me?
Right. Her parents are older than other parents, and she is currently obsessed with names, name spelling, and identity. Her actual name is Jane, but she hates the name Jane Johnson because it's too bland, so she goes by Janie for fun. And she has a habit of writing her name different ways. And when she absent-mindedly puts the wrong name on a test, her teacher makes a comment about her having an identity crisis.
Oh, no.
So, like I said,
Foreshadowing.
And I get it too. I mean, I never really liked my name either, so I feel like I used to doodle my name different ways to make it seem more interesting, but never on a test. So you can get points taken off your test for writing your name.
Yeah,
wrong.
you get like 2 points for getting your name right.
What's in a name?
That which we call a rose by any other name would smell as sweet.
Rosebud. In Janie's opinion, her friends all have better names than her. Her best friends are Sarah Charlotte Sherwood and Adair Odell. And there's also Peter, Jason, and Katrina. So Jason and Katrina, you have 2 for 5.
I know a lot of these people, I think.
On the friends list, yeah. And these kids are all fun and silly, but they're relatively nondescript and mostly exist as plot points and scene fillers. But it's in the lunchroom with this group of friends, in mid-October, when Janie first sees something she can never unsee. A picture of her 3-year-old missing child self on the side of a milk carton. Like I said, she's recently lactose intolerant. So while everyone else gets an 8-ounce carton of milk, Janie is pissed because she's eating a peanut butter sandwich at lunch and the only thing she has to wash it down with is cranberry juice.
Those are not complimentary flavors.
No.
I'm sorry, but as someone who drinks a lot of cranberry juice, that's no.
Sarah Charlotte says.
Okay, who's been kidnapped this time?
Everybody turned the milk cartons over to see who had been kidnapped. The local dairy put pictures of stolen children on the back of the carton, and every few weeks, there was a new child. Adair says,
I don't know how you're supposed to recognize somebody who was 3 years old when she got taken from a shopping center in New Jersey. That was nearly a dozen years ago. It's ridiculous.
And then Pete says,
My mother says none of them are really kidnapped anyhow. She says it's all hype. All it is a divorce where one parent gets mad and takes his own kid, but he doesn't tell the other parent where they're going. It's never actually a stranger stealing a kid like on television.
To which Sarah Charlotte says,
You mean they weren't really stolen? Nobody wants a ransom? Nobody's being tortured?
So, getting pretty serious, getting pretty heavy there at the old lunch table. I'm not sure what statistical knowledge Cooney had in the late 1980s or what was available then, but Pete's mother's explanation is fairly accurate, if not absolute and flawed. To quote an article from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, published just a month ago, here at NCMEC, we know that stranger abductions are the rarest type of missing child case. In fact, fewer than 1% of cases reported to the NCMEC are classified as non-family abductions.
Wow.
So
1%.
That's not even that's just non-family. These could still be people who know the children. It doesn't necessarily mean strangers.
Oh my God.
So it's a very, very small percentage regardless.
I was going to say in modern times, it's, almost always family.
Pretty much almost always, right.
I guess it always was, maybe.
That's the thing that made serial killers so scary is that they were typically just sort of, it felt like random selection because
they would have their MO, they would have their type.
It was more about the type of the person than if they knew them.
The person themselves.
Right. That sort of fed the whole hysteria surrounding oh no, strangers are going to come take your children.
Stranger danger.
The stranger the danger.
The stranger the stranger. I don't know.
The stranger the stranger.
The stranger the stranger, the more stranger danger.
That works for me. Janie, overcome with hate for her cranberry juice at this point, decides to drink Sarah Charlotte's as of yet untouched carton of milk.
Don't do it, Janie. All of us lactose intolerant people know that no matter how bad we want it, it's not worth it.
She just needs to wait a couple decades for all the almond milk and the oat milk options.
Yeah, there probably weren't a whole lot of alternatives back then. There certainly weren't in my childhood. I'm really lucky I didn't become lactose intolerant until my mid to late 20s.
Right, and they say it doesn't get better.
It doesn't.
Janie set the carton down inside. The little girl on the back of the milk carton stared back at her. It wasn't much of a picture. After all, how good could a picture be when it was printed on a milk carton? The girl was an ordinary little girl. Hair in tight pigtails, one against each thin cheek. A dress with a narrow white collar. The dress was white, with tiny dark polka dots. Something evil and thick. settled on Janie, blocking her throat, dimming her eyes. She remembered that dress, how the collar itched, remembered the fabric. It was summer fabric. The wind blew through it. Remembered how those braids swung like red silk against her cheeks. Janie held Sarah Charlotte's empty milk carton and stared at the photograph of the little girl and thought, I was kidnapped.
I have some goosebumps happening.
And if it's true, then her real name is Jenny Spring, and she's a year younger than she thought she was.
Oh.
So this is where I have to give a content warning, everybody.
Probably should have done it earlier.
Probably should have. As you guys know,
trigger warning.
Yeah, we're discussing missing children.
Yeah.
That's what this whole story is about. And I'm about to get into some of the more higher profile cases that led up to the milk carton campaign. And I do get into some of the details, not, to a gross extent, but it's there just so you know.
Sometimes we cross into true crime territory, but we definitely want to give a content trigger warning for all of our Darkling friends, just in case you're not into that sort of thing.
Absolutely.
Not that any of us are into that sort of thing, but
I would say I'm into missing children necessarily, but I find the concept generally enticing. So if we remember from our Dark Origin series, the 80s were an especially dark time in American history thanks to the borderline apotropaic incantational warnings to children known as stranger danger. Media outlets began latching onto a number of high-profile child abduction and missing children's cases. And as we learned in our intro to Courage the Cowardly Dog, Ted Turner gave the world its first 24-hour news network in 1980 by way of CNN, meaning people could now follow investigation developments in real time, without delay, steadily raising the temperature of the waters of mass hysteria to the point of boiling over. I'm doing my best not to repeat a lot of the things I said before. If you have listened to those episodes, even recently, this is still going to hopefully be fresh, but I'm also not covering everything here that we talked about in those episodes. So if you want the whole full picture, definitely listen to both things.
Even if it's been a minute, maybe a refresher is in order for some of our more dedicated long-term Darklings.
The haunting concept of stranger danger was born out of the missing children movement, or more appropriately, the missing children panic of the 70s and 80s, which that specific Wikipedia page describes as a moral panic concerning child abduction and murder by strangers in the United States. It began with those high-profile cases that I'm about to describe. But the panic wouldn't have been much without the quoting subsequent media reports exaggerating and misrepresenting child abduction statistics. The panic popularized the misleading claim that 1.5 million children per year disappeared or were abducted in the United States, introducing the stranger danger narrative into public discourse and intensified tropes relating to the sexual predation and murder of boys by homosexuals in American culture.
Yikes.
Especially after the publicization of gay serial killers Otis Toole, John Wayne Gacy, and Randy Kraft.
I wondered how long it would take before you'd say Gacy.
Really unfortunate. But luckily, since Janie is a female, I won't have to get into those guys and those crimes. But I do want to point out that majority of quote-unquote stereotypical kidnappings actually involved girls, not boys.
For sure.
It's just that the public found boy abductions to be that much more sensational and horrifying. Like, they could understand taking a little
boys
girl,
matter.
but not a little boy.
Right. Boys matter to society at large. Girls might just disappear sometimes.
It happens. It happens.
Is anybody else out there thinking in this moment, as I am right now, of that one song off of Ali and AJ's first album called I Am One of Them, about missing children, to raise awareness for missing children? Who remembers this?
Raise your hand. You in the front.
You. That just popped into my brain, and that came out in, let's check, I think 2004? Let's check.
I don't know if I know this, so...
Okay, yeah, this came out in 2005, which is beyond the terms that we're right now talking about, but it was track 9 on Ali and AJ's first album, Into the Rush. I get in the car, another tragic disaster. I'm safe where I am, yet another is captured. The traffic is stopped, people just stare. Another alert, does the kid have a prayer? Life is not fair.
Wow.
It's hard to look outside my door with all the news reports and more, yet I'll do my part and stay on alert for all the kids out there who are getting hurt. It could have happened to me. Can you make me believe this could have a happy end? Because I am one of them.
Well, good for them for bringing awareness.
Yeah. The second verse is actually darker, but...
Dang.
I remember this vividly. They did kind of like a whole campaign around missing children.
Never hurts.
Yeah, it's
Never
true.
hurts.
Just like the milk cart. I mean, everything. Any effort, to bring awareness to or to, call recognition to a missing kid.
It's like a bake sale, It probably won't make that much money, but it's more money than you would have had otherwise.
It's not a terrible analogy, as terrible as the analogy is.
Is that insensitive of me to compare missing
little.
children to a bake sale?
You're not comparing the missing children to the
I'm
bake
comparing
sale.
them to cookies and brownies and cakes.
No, that's not what you were doing, I hope.
But so kind of like Allie and AJ, we're just like them. We also have a platform that we can use.
Sure.
So I think we should take a moment to scream it from our own little rooftop that homosexuality and pedophilia are not the same category.
Oh, not even close. This is not a debate. This should never have been a debate. This was homophobia at its root and using a very real, very terrible, tragic problem and societal stain to, perpetuate homophobia. And that's not okay.
Lots of ignorance floating around. Mainstream media just sort of, taking things and running with it without understanding it.
Or pandering to their audience who were homophobic.
That's true. Man, and you guys didn't think it was going to get very dark tonight.
They know it's always going to be pretty dark.
The earliest high-profile case was the memorable disappearance of Aton Patz, who went missing on the morning of May 25th, 1979, in the Soho neighborhood of Lower Manhattan. He was 6 years old, and it was his first time walking to the school bus stop by himself. It was only 2 blocks. He should have been safe, but he never made it. His father was a professional photographer, so he had tons of photos of Aton, which were printed on missing child posters and even projected on screens in Times Square, which drew enough media attention to give the investigation a national audience, to the point that Ronald Reagan later declared May 25th to be National Missing Children's Day, which, as it so happens, is now International Missing Children's Day.
We talked about it early on the show, like years ago, the Cropsey documentary.
Yeah.
About kind of the Cropsey boogeyman who was like stealing children in Staten Island. And I think it was kind of inspired by, the case of Aton and others. It's a haunting documentary about several of these cases in the 70s and 80s in and around New York. So
I watched that in preparation for our History of Halloween series like 2 years ago.
That's right.
It's a wild time.
They try to put a face on the boogeyman that's stealing children.
Right.
Because it became, like you were saying, somewhat of an urban legend over time.
Yeah. Did you watch that new show, Eric?
No.
With old Benedict Cumberbatch?
Mm-mm.
They loosely based that off of the Aton Patz case, but it's a very fantastical version. And they changed so many of the details, but it's that same concept of like a 12-year-old boy. It's his first time walking to school through New York and he doesn't make it. Kind of like how Stranger Things used Jacob Wetterly.
I mean, these, like you were saying earlier, these are the stories that capture our attention. And because you think, just like Allie and AJ, you think like it could have been me, it could have been my kid, it could have, you always put yourself in those shoes because the one-off time that it does happen, you can't help but be horrified and haunted by it.
The next highest profile case was Adam Walsh, who was also 6 years old when he went missing from a Sears department store in Hollywood Mall in Hollywood, Florida on July 27th, 1981. This is the strongest content warning I can give. Sorry, I have to say this. 2 weeks later, his severed head was found in a drainage ditch alongside a Florida turnpike.
Yeah, that was intense.
Adam's father is John Walsh of America's Most Wanted. A TV movie called Adam was made and premiered on October 10th, 1983, with 38 million viewers its first airing.
Whoa.
It was broadcast 3 times and concluded each showing with a series of missing children advertisements, 55 in total, of which 13 were recognized and found.
Wow.
In 1984, Congress passed the Missing Children's Assistance Act, which not only established the national system for recording missing persons, but it also allowed for the creation of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, which was organized by a few people, including John Walsh and Noreen Gosh, whose son Johnny went missing in 1982. Johnny Gosh and Eugene Martin were both paper boys for the Des Moines Register, who both went missing from their paper routes 2 years apart.
Horrible.
For the same newspaper. Johnny went missing on September 5th, 1982, when he was 12, and Eugene on August 12, 1984, when he was 13. Because of this, a local Des Moines dairy company called Anderson Erickson Dairy began printing photos of Johnny and Eugene on their milk cartons, although sadly without success. And not long after, a Chicago dairy did the same thing. A nonprofit called the National Child Safety Council launched the Missing Children Milk Carton Program. And in less than 3 months, 700 independent dairies across the U.S. were routinely printing photos of local missing children on their milk cartons, with an estimated 3 to 5 billion cartons produced.
Wow.
Got milk?
I love that it was kind of grassroots in that way.
Grassroots, like grass-fed dairy?
Yeah, sure. I love that this was like a campaign that kind of caught traction just based on
a couple small places
business
doing it
owners trying to do something good for the communities that they were in. Like, there's this space that's free. You know, they could have sold that space to advertisers. They could have, you know, maximized profits but that's not how they were thinking.
That's
they were
true.
Thinking what's going to make an impact in a positive way.
And I agree. It's a really great thing. But as we've said before, the milk carton program did more for the missing children panic than it ever really did for the missing children themselves.
The missing children. Like, their heart was in the right place. The intentions were good, but
it was phased out in the 90s as paper cartons were replaced by plastic jugs, and efforts were ultimately concluded when the Amber Alert system was established and proven to be exponentially more successful at finding missing children within critical timeframes.
Yep, that's been addressed in most of the documentaries that I've seen on the subject in general. It's just the Amber Alert was that much better.
Yes.
More effective.
But that isn't to say that the milk cartons never worked. It did have some success. And in one particular instance, a kidnapped child recognized her own face on a milk carton in real life. Her name was Bonnie Lohman. Bonnie's earliest memories are of moving around a lot with her mother and stepfather. She lived in Hawaii, she lived in Saipan. No matter where they lived, she was kept secluded from other people and was rarely allowed to spend time outdoors. Eventually, they settled down in Colorado in the 1980s, where Bonnie was finally allowed out in public. While accompanying her stepfather to a local grocery store, 7-year-old Bonnie suddenly realized she was famous. Why else would her picture be on all these milk cartons?
Bless her heart.
She hadn't been taught to read yet, so she couldn't spell out the words missing child. But by some miracle, her stepfather bought a carton of milk and even cut out the picture for her to keep. Although not without a warning to keep it a secret. But she ended up leaving the picture with some toys at the house of a playmate, whose parents found it and called the police, who then intervened and returned Bonnie to her biological father and legal guardian.
Wow.
So what had originally happened between her parents was a bitter custody battle that her father won, and her mother came and abducted her when she was only 3 years old. But because it was obviously a non-custodial kidnapping, the police considered the crime a domestic dispute, and so very little effort was made to track her down. So I know Cooney cites seeing the missing child poster in LaGuardia Airport as the true inspiration for this book. But I also know that every major publisher of every fiction novel requires the disclosure. This is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents either are the product of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, events, or locales is entirely coincidental.
We've all seen the fine print.
And I'm sure it's entirely coincidental that Janie does wonder privately to herself if her mother is her mother and her father is her stepfather, or vice versa. The only thing I know for sure is Janie also keeps the milk carton depicting her likeness at 3 years old. She washes it clean, flattens it out, and keeps it tucked inside her English binder.
I mean, wouldn't you?
Every time she begins to doubt herself, she takes it out to remind herself to keep searching for answers. Because if she doesn't, nobody will.
Nobody's coming to save you but yourself.
Precisely.
And that is a life lesson for the ages in whatever circumstance.
So drink it up, you lactose intolerant kids. So now that Janie has this strange, impossible, forbidden knowledge, she must continue going through the motions of her exceedingly normal teenage life. Although everything is now cast in a strange, sinister light. Like, for example, how her parents keep 1 million pictures of her around the house, but none are from before the age 5. No baby pictures of baby Janie anywhere. She spends less time with her friends and more time with Reeve, the boy next door, leading to the blossoming of their, more romantic relationship.
Cute.
While navigating the awkward tension hanging over every interaction with her parents, Frank and Miranda Johnson.
I can't imagine trying to function in a circumstance like this because you can't trust your
I can't either.
Parental figures.
You begin to doubt everything.
Not to say that that's necessarily an uncommon situation, unfortunately, but I would hope that a situation like this where you don't know if they're lying to you about your own identity or not.
Right.
Is less common.
And I want to read a passage that I feel best describes the development of Janie's moral struggle, as well as the decline of her mental health throughout the story. So after getting home from kissing Reeve in a big pile of autumn leaves, it's very romantic.
That is romantic.
Janie sighed and opened her book bag, dumping the contents on her bed. Her cheap blue cloth 3-ring notebook fell out on top of the math, biology, American Lit, and world history books. Janie opened the cover. The back of the flattened milk carton stared up at her. Flour Dairy, the dairy that cares. 100% whole milk, 1/2 pint. She unclipped it, turned it over. Jenny Spring looked up at her. The 800 number was like a dart being thrown into her eyes. I could call, she thought. I could ask. But what could she ask? All the questions were unthinkable. Besides, what would it do to her parents to find out their very own daughter was calling the authorities to announce she'd been kidnapped? Her mother, who had spent the day baking a special cake. Her father, who had come home from soccer full of victory and deflated by loss. Janie picked up her phone. She dialed 1. She dialed 800. She dialed 34672. She was gasping for breath. With 2 digits to go, she hung up. She missed the phone. It clattered, slid off the bed, and hit the floor with a crash as loud as trains colliding. But her mother didn't yell upstairs to see if she was hurt. Up here, it was the world crashing in. Downstairs, nobody had heard a sound.
We've all been in moments like that.
All right, get a grip on yourself, she thought. I'll think about Reeve now. I'll think about kisses and love and dating. But she thought of Jenny Spring, of parents somewhere in New Jersey who missed their little girl so much that all these years later they were still hoping by the thinnest thread they would somehow find their Jenny again, and Jenny would be safe, not murdered or raped or abused or happy and ignorant with another family. This, thought Janie, must be what heavy drugs are like. Hallucinations, whether you want them or not. Temperature-changing, personality-changing doses. And here she tries to call a few friends, but realizes she can't talk to them about this and can't tell them what's going on, or the whole thing would get blown, possibly way out of proportion, but maybe just to the correct size proportions.
Yeah.
So she's thinking, the whole school would know that I actually believe I was kidnapped. Guidance department would hear the rumors. Your daughter's hoping you're not her parents. Your daughter is planning to call the FBI on you. Your daughter's living in a sick, twisted, perverted daydream in which... What if I can't get this horrible idea out of my brain? What if it sits there and grows, like some terrible egg, splitting open and turning into something real?
That isolation of having this humongous secret that changes your whole entire life and you can't take it anywhere. You can't take it to your friends either.
She's officially spending all of her time inside of her head.
It's consuming.
She goes from living a normal life to this
having
all-consuming...
the mental health, struggles that you and I both have, unfortunately, although we, haven't been in these shoes exactly, we can relate to something that totally consumes our waking thoughts and sometimes our subconscious and sleeping thoughts.
Right.
And we can't get out from under it. And it's not fun.
Nope. The spirals.
It's a spiral.
Oh,
but
the spirals.
It's reminiscent of like how OCD feels, like certain ideas are kind of contaminated or like, and in her case, it's happening throughout her entire life. She can't look at anything, any piece of her life safely.
Right.
Because any piece of her life that she looks at is going to take her back to this idea that she may or may not be really who she thinks she is. Like none of it's going to feel real. The derealization and depersonalization from
right
just seeing her face on the milk carton.
World rocking.
I can't imagine.
Yeah, because like at that point, even to look at something you've seen a million times, you're now questioning it or like you see it differently. Like it's this whole...
Yeah.
But how does that fit into this new narrative of my life story?
Learning something that goes back that far. Anything that's been built on top of this foundation is now in question.
I forget what it was, but there's one part she's like, this has been one of my favorite things since when? When did this become part of my life? When was I first introduced to this?
You would unravel like your personality depending on, the support that you are or aren't given, I guess, in a circumstance like this, your personality would unravel because you wouldn't trust yourself because you don't know yourself.
And speaking of not trusting yourself or any of the things around you, I think it's time we talked about Janie's parents. Mr. Johnson is an accountant who coaches Little League soccer in the fall.
Pillar of the community, no doubt.
While Mrs. Johnson volunteers at a hospital twice a week.
Pillar of the community, no doubt.
Janie's mom is very enthusiastic about finding creative mother-daughter activities like cake decorating classes.
Overcompensation.
And her dad has some serious hang-ups about keeping Janie young and keeping his wife skinny. By that I mean making comments about watching her weight by not eating the cake in their cake decorating class.
I didn't think of a joke fast enough, but I just wanted to be like, he's a male.
You mean he's a man? In fact, there's a fair amount of fat shaming in this book. It's all meant to be funny, but it comes across harsh when viewed through a modern lens.
I mean, even viewed through those lenses, it was harsh. People just accepted it. The diet culture is a whole other dark rabbit trail.
And when it comes to keeping Janie young, not only does her father resist societal norms like teaching her how to drive, but his gestures of endearment toward Janie suggest he sees her as a little girl, like calling her kitten and always touching her hair and twirling it around in his fingers. It's almost shocking to me that he so willingly lets her go off with Reeve, a high school senior. Although he does make the awkward comment that Reeve is allowed to eat dinner at their house as long as he sleeps at his own. Cool, Mr. Johnson, thanks, well, no problem.
I mean, I'm deciding if I want to get up on a soapbox or not. The hyper-sexualization and over-sexualization of teenage girls by their parents or father in this whole culture is a huge problem because they defend virginity, which is a social construct, more than they defend the person. They defend the idea that the purity belongs to them. It's a societal issue, and it's not cool.
And despite their shortcomings, the Johnsons seem very available to Janie and attentive to her needs. So the shadows don't begin to creep in until Janie suspects that her parents are actually her kidnappers. This shift in tone, despite coming early in the novel, really darkens all the different colors of her everyday life, like we were talking about. For example, she walks next door to Reeve's house one afternoon to ask his mom if she remembers when the Johnsons moved in. She does, of course, and describes Janie's mom as being extremely strict and overprotective.
Too many dreadful possibilities out there. Mothers have nightmares about their babies, Janie, from drowning in a neighbor's swimming pool to snapping their spine playing football. I think all mothers fear that one dreadful accident, when the child dashes out in front of a truck, when some maniac snatches the child during the 1 second the mother isn't looking. Your mother has always felt that way, Janie. She's always been afraid. Woof.
Afraid someone's gonna do to Janie what
has already
she
done.
Perhaps
maybe a
has
guilt
already done
thing in her mind, but I will agree that a lot of mothers feel this way. I think my mother felt this way. I understand it. I really do. If any darklings out there, if you know Hank and John Green, who are incredible, some of my favorite thinkers of our generation. They're amazing. Hank Green recently did a stand-up comedy special on the Dropout Network, which is it was a YouTube channel. Now they have their whole their own app and their own platform, basically, where they do and produce a bunch of different shows and games, and it's really cool. But Hank did a comedy special for Dropout, and it is amazing. But he does a whole bit on this exact thing, where moms basically go to bed at night and all they can think about are the just hundreds of ways that their child could die. That's just what they do when they lay their head on their pillow at night. And we laugh at it, but I think that there is some degree of truth to it.
Of course, yeah.
You're responsible for a life and the way that stays with you. For some people, some anxiously attached people possibly, this would become rumination.
Absolutely.
Very easily.
So, when viewed through a lens of abduction, Miss Johnson is one creepy lady. Same with Mr. Johnson's infantilization of Janie. We begin to wonder what sort of depraved resentments he might secretly have about her getting older. So that coupled with what you said earlier about him sexualizing her, but also wanting to protect her sexuality, to the point of bringing things up that nobody was even talking about.
Exactly.
Why would you say that, Mr. Johnson?
Right.
That's a
nobody
weird thing
was
to say,
go there.
Mr.
Nobody
Johnson.
Reeve was not going to ask to stay the night. He wasn't going to sneak over, more than likely. But now that you put the idea,
I don't know. It was the 90s. I mean, yeah, it's just all this stuff begins to look differently.
Mm-hmm. Well, Cooney's doing a really good job of giving the reader
She's giving you seeds,
reasons
right?
and opportunity to doubt.
Absolutely.
It's a suspense thriller. I mean,
It's good.
That's what she's here to do.
It's well crafted. Janie's relationship with her parents first becomes strained when Mrs. Johnson dismisses her request to see her birth certificate. This is where the whole learning to drive storyline becomes significant because Janie won't be able to get a driver's license without her birth certificate. Her mother says it's in a safe deposit box at the bank. She's too busy to go today and tomorrow the bank is closed. So Janie insists they go Monday, which leads to an argument that results in her mother gaslighting her by telling her to stop being ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. You're being difficult. You're being a problem. Your simple request that I am refusing
I'm avoiding,
to accommodate is the issue.
I'm the one being evasive. So now it's more than just a picture on a milk carton.
Mm-hmm.
She's seeing the effects of the abduction in real time. And while Janie is pulling away from her parents, or perhaps because she's allowing herself the room to think and process, she begins to exhibit the recovery of repressed memories, which manifest as visual and auditory flashbacks that she calls daymares, because she refuses to believe that they are actual real memories.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, they must be hallucinations or nightmares that she's having while awake, brought on by some demon, because she researches the etymology of nightmare and sees the word demon. So she plays up the whole demon concept.
She is like me.
Yeah. Her first daymare comes from the same day she sees herself on the milk carton. Reeve picks her up from school, and after driving around a while, they go for ice cream on the way home.
She turned to look at her sundae. The world shifted. The shop seemed to spin around her, all its flavors, all its booths, tilting and screaming. She was sitting with somebody else, sitting on a high stool, a stool that swiveled. She was turning herself slowly and carefully by holding onto the counter. Her feet did not touch the footrest. She was little. She was admiring her white cotton socks as she turned because they had a little strip of lace. A woman next to her, not swiveling, long straight hair cascading down the woman's back. So pretty, Janie had to touch it. The woman kept her hand in the air behind Janie's back so she wouldn't tip off the spinning stool. Janie was having a sundae, whipped cream on it, eating the cherry off her sundae first, and then the one off the woman's sundae. They were laughing. Janie was little. The woman hugged her, swung her around as the stool had swung. There was a hot wind. They were outside now, in a huge parking lot, maybe the biggest parking lot in the world. Her dress, white with tiny dark dots, blew in the air.
And that's when Reeve snaps her out of her trance because she's basically having a panic attack.
I mean, who wouldn't?
And later, at Reeve's house, she has another daymare triggered by the sight of an apron.
Apron. It was white, heavy, almost as heavy as canvas. It had a bib. Her mother kept little hard candies in one pocket, and Janie could stretch up and reach her baby hand into the pocket to take out one candy, with a cellophane wrapper that crinkled. But my mother doesn't wear aprons, thought Janie.
And after the first fight with her mom about her birth certificate, she has another daymare about two screaming babies in the kitchen getting all the attention, while she tries to ask for a glass of milk. Nobody hears her, so she ends up trying to pour it herself, spills it on the floor, and then cleans it up all by herself. And these flashbacks keep coming for most of the story, but she has just one more before the truth is revealed at the halfway point. She's at the mall with her mom and the twins, which we know to be the two screaming babies from her previous memory. She gets mad at her mom for not buying her something, so she storms off by herself.
Oh no.
She wanders into the ice cream shop or the diner or whatever it is, where the mysterious woman sits next to her and buys her a sundae. Did I mention how ironic it is that she's now lactose intolerant? There's so much dairy mentioned in this story.
Well, it's like maybe that's the root of the trauma. Like there are a lot of people that believe that we develop these conditions based on how our body internalizes things that happen to us.
I was thinking that too.
I have had, it's in remission currently, knock on wood, but I had a thyroid condition. And some people say thyroid conditions can come from feeling like you're not heard or you can't speak up or you don't have a voice for yourself.
Yeah.
So in that same vein, it kind of makes sense to me that she might become lactose intolerant because it was just at the beginning there.
It's like sympathetic psychology.
It's fascinating.
Like sympathetic magic. I like that she was like, I'm just going to throw as much milk at this as I possibly can.
There's going to be a lot of milk.
There's going to be shit ton of dairy in this book.
I should have used the cow emoji for our post. Maybe I still will. We have time.
This repressed memory comes just off the heels of Janie's most disturbing discovery. See, she has the opportunity to attend a chaperone trip to Spain, which means she will need a passport, which only increases the urgency of her need for her birth certificate. So she takes it upon herself to search the house for the key to the safe deposit box so she can go to the bank herself, which in reality I don't think would have worked anyway, because I think you probably need ID
More
to
than likely,
get into
yeah.
that at the bank.
Maybe not
but
back
it
then.
was the 90s.
Yeah, maybe now, most definitely, but maybe not back then.
So she checks the drawers of her mother's desk and then makes her way up to the attic because she feels suddenly suspicious about a collection of boxes that she's always seen up there but never looked inside of. So she goes through the boxes labeled after their initials: J for Jane, F for Frank, M for Miranda. She reminisces silently on old times and fond memories, wishing desperately for the proof that her parents really are her parents. But then she comes across a hidden black trunk labeled with an H.
She lifted the heavy lid carefully, tilting it back against the wall. The trunk was filled with papers and photographs. She was immediately bored. Old school reports, old term papers, old fill-in-the-blank maps and quizzes. Somebody named Hannah. She'd never heard of anybody named Hannah. How could an unknown Hannah merit this stack of attention? Janie felt irritable and coughed again from the dust and the mothballs. Beneath a 6th grade report on the beginning of mankind, Mesopotamia, and a sheaf of mimeographed maps where Hannah had wrongly penciled in Germany on France, was a school photograph. Janie recognized the cardboard folder immediately, the kind that offered your parents 6 different purchase agreements, so many wallet sizes, so many 8x10s. She flipped open to see what Hannah looked like. A pretty girl, perhaps 12 or 13, looked back at her. Sweet, blonde, mild. From behind all the papers, a little piece of fabric stuck up. White cloth. Tiny, dark polka dots. With hands of ice, Janie plucked at the material, shifting the layers of school papers until she could pull it up. It was the dress on the milk carton.
I had so many thoughts in my head swirling around. I was like, Hannah was the kid who was taken on the milk carton. Mm-hmm. They have the dress that she was wearing in the picture. If it was in the picture, how was it on her when she was kidnapped? What the hell is happening right now?
I was doing the same thing as I was reading it in real time to all of you.
I was definitely going like sci-fi with it. I was like, oh no, is this another Watcher in the Woods situation? Is there a time loop?
There's always a time loop.
There's always a time loop.
Damn it.
But really, at the core of it, what this tells Janie and us is that Frank and Miranda Johnson lost their daughter, Hannah. Mm-hmm. And in their grief, one or both of them decided to kidnap another little girl to replace her and raise her as their own. And that's pretty dark.
It is pretty dark.
Especially because it's partially true, just not in the way we might think.
Grief will make people do strange things, but hopefully not this.
There's a reason you can't just walk into a hospital and just go take a child, a baby, because people do that all the time. Oh. When Janie just can't stand it any longer, and she storms into the house to confront her parents one day in the next chapter, they have no choice but to tell her their side of the story, for better or worse. According to the Johnsons, Hannah is their daughter, and Janie is Hannah's daughter. When Hannah was 16, she joined the Hare Krishna and eventually went to live in the quote-unquote temple commune in California, where she was forced to marry another member and procreate. She had a baby girl, Jane. Wanting better for Jane, she escaped the cult and brought her home to the Johnsons' house. They actually had a different last name at the time, but they feared that the cult would come to claim their own, so they changed their name and moved wherever Frank's company could transfer him. Hannah eventually returned to the cult, and the Johnsons eventually moved into the house where they live today. I think the inclusion of the cult narrative at the time would have given this story a lot of gravity. Mostly because cults used to be a much more common topic of discussion within mainstream media and pop culture.
I was just listening to the Pod Meets World podcast episode on cult fiction, the episode where Sean joins a cult.
Yeah.
And they talked about how relevant it was at the time.
I mean, and it's still around today. Technically, there are more cults than ever now.
The internet. The internet has really helped the boom.
They're predominantly online, yeah, but they're called boutique cults because they're very niche.
Right. You can be in a cult for whatever your belief is and find people that immerse themselves in the same thing.
But as far as I can tell, and forgive me if I don't know much about this, feel free to correct me and then I'll know more about Hare Krishna history.
I mean, there's debate on whether it's a cult at all, first off.
That's the part that really confused me because there are Hare Krishna-like cults that stemmed off from the religion, just like a lot of American cults stemmed off
from
of
Christianity.
Protestant Christianity.
Right.
So it's a very specific, like, they're not the same, but they are.
Right. Like
it's complicated.
There is a Hindu movement, Hare Krishna.
Yeah.
But then there is a branching off of that is more cult-like in its practice.
Hare Krishna is the name given to a unique branch of Hinduism that was founded specifically in the US in the 1960s. And so like any cult concept would have been like a branch off of a branch. So it's like you have a big tree, Hinduism, you got the big branch, and then you got little twigs.
Yeah.
That's the cults. And then the leaves are the cult members and they flap in the wind. Isn't it cute?
No.
All right, kids at school, we're going to make a Hindu Hare Krishna tree. Family tree. Use your hands.
Your palm is Hinduism.
And your fingers the branches.
Take that home to your Protestant Christian family. Put it on the fridge.
Put it on the fridge. We have magnets. We have That's Pretty Dark magnets in our merch,
we do.
Our merch store.
You guys could have your kids' back to school art underneath a That's Pretty Dark magnet that you can find on that'sprettydark.com. We've never really done like a plug in the midst of an episode.
Go to our merch tab.
For merch, but we do have some merch, and a magnet would be so fun for back to school, would it not?
It would. All right, so the Hare Krishna consciousness was brought over by a Swami named Bhaktivedanta. I'm sure I said it wrong.
Sounded right to me.
Who began by converting hippies in New York City. And if you've seen Mad Men, you've seen this depicted. And it kind of shows how crazy it would have seemed to the culture at the time, the Western culture. This sect is unique mostly because it's monotheistic and believes Krishna to be the god of all Hindu gods. It's heavy on karma and reincarnation, as well as the rejection of all earthly comforts, making it an ascetic cult or sect. It's anti-violent and therefore vegetarian because animals have souls, and it does more damage to you to kill the animal to eat it than it actually does to the animal. It does more harm to you as a person to act in violence.
You're ingesting trauma, essentially.
But that isn't to say that this sect, or whatever you want to call it, didn't have its flaws. To quote Britannica.com, the Hare Krishna movement was among the first groups to be targeted by anti-cult organizations in the early 1970s. During the 1980s, it was frequently accused of brainwashing, and anti-cult groups attempted to deprogram some Hare Krishna members. Claiming psychological and emotional damage, several former members sued the organization unsuccessfully. And this is the narrative that Frank and Miranda Johnson bring to the table in the book when they talk about it as a cult. They say it completely changed Hannah to the point that she was like a silver spoon that needed polishing. She was dull, toneless, and mechanical. She never smiled. It didn't just change her, it ruined her. And it stole their daughter away from them. So they're pretty biased. And I don't know what to make of Hare Krishna. I really don't. I don't know that much about it.
I read that it is a branch of Hinduism that incorporates more like Judeo-Christian ideas with the monotheism and everything. Like that
makes it more
it isn't like
accessible
necessarily a purely
to the Western mind.
Like a pure Hindu sort of belief system.
Correct. Yeah.
The cult or the original branching.
It also gives power to females. So, it's an equal opportunity religion. But the Johnsons explain that that's why they're afraid of, Janie growing up and turning 16, because that's when they lost Hannah, putting their own trauma onto their next child. They also don't have her birth certificate, and they don't know what they're going to do about it or how she's going to get her driver's license. These are just not things they've ever figured out or thought about.
I probably thought about it, but they're like, that's in the distant future. And as any parent or guardian knows, comes all too quickly. They
also continue perpetuating the trauma by begging her not to leave them the way Hannah did. And she promises them that she won't, that she is theirs, and she will always be their daughter.
I'm thinking there's some ironic foreshadowing.
I'll never tell.
Until the end of this episode. XOXO.
And despite all this, Janie still doesn't tell them about the milk carton. And as a result, is increasingly convinced that the story that they told her was a lie. So, the second half of the book is comprised of Janie continuing her search for the truth while doing a pretty poor job of pretending like everything is okay.
Yeah.
Taking one hell of a toll on her mental well-being.
Been there.
Sarah Charlotte basically ends their friendship, or at least gives her a really hard time about things. Reeve eventually breaks up with her.
Aww.
the douche.
I wanted to like him.
And the Johnsons start to see her as a troubled teen.
I mean, she is troubled.
She is officially a troubled teen for a few reasons, but because she skips school one day. She plays hooky with Reeve before they break up. She convinces him to drive her to New Jersey to find her real family.
To get ice cream in cones. Ugh. Gilmore Girls, Jess and Rory.
So they stop at a phone booth to look up their address, Brave Little Toaster style. And they go spy on their house. She literally watches her siblings get off the school bus and walk home, all with the same crazy red hair that she has. And the woman who opens the door to let them in also has red hair. And Janie knows deep down that those are her siblings and that that's her mother. I also want to point out that Cooney specifically says, so they're not latchkey kids.
She uses the word.
Yeah, my heart was warmed because I was like, wow, that was a term even in 1990. They were calling them latchkey kids.
Nice.
And it's throughout Janie's moral struggle during the second half that she does something that I've enjoyed calling a Freudian whoopsie-doo.
The tone in which you just said that so seriously.
It's a technical term.
Sure.
See, she's doing that thing we've all done where like you write a letter or a message to someone and you're not going to send it. You're just going to like tuck it away and forget about it. And then like it's cathartic in a way, you feel better, you can heal and move on from whatever that situation is without having to send it and like start all the drama. And that's Janie's plan, or at least that's what she tells herself. She comes to a point where she accepts that whether or not the story was 100% true, the Johnsons are not bad people. They lost a daughter, and to fill that void, they chose to love Janie. But she also knows that she has to tell the Springs that she's alive and well, because it would be cruel not to.
Yeah.
To let them just go on, not knowing what happened to Jenny.
And there's some naivete to that because she's thinking, I could just let them know that I'm okay, but it's not going to change my life or their life in any way. She's a teenager thinking this, not thinking of really the repercussions that could come with an admission like that.
Exactly what she does. She's trying to reason through it. And yeah, she tells herself,
there won't be any criminal proceedings. No one will press charges and I'll live my life out with the Johnsons happy as a clam.
It'll be fine.
Yeah.
Right. This plot point is a cyclone of reservations and good intentions. Like a tornado that's already spun halfway around by the time she's made a decision to do one thing versus the other. She plans to just tuck the letter, in her binder with the milk carton. But she ends up sealing it in an envelope that already has the Springs home address on the front and with the Johnsons' return address in the corner.
Good plan.
And here comes the whoopsie-doo.
That seemed like a whoopsie-doo already to me.
She misplaces the envelope.
Whoopsie-doo.
And she's immediately convinced that someone will come along, put a stamp on it, and mail it for her. Some good Samaritan, she says. So in her mind, it's done. They're going to find out this is the point of no return. And I see your face. I see your speculation. But we just said she's a teenager trying to reason through all these things. So she doesn't know, more than likely, the letter's not going to get mailed. It's probably in the trash somewhere.
Oh, to have that optimism. I never even had it as a teenager.
I mean, she's not being optimistic. She's being pretty pessimistic. She's very, very concerned about this.
Well, the fact that it will eventually be mailed for her by a good Samaritan.
That's true.
It's rather optimistic.
It's like people say, the world used to be a much better place. It's going to hell in a handbasket.
People used to talk to each other on the street and mail each other's letters when they found them.
Sending nudes to each other, to all their friends. Sending naked pictures to somebody they just met on the subway.
Who's to say this isn't a better world?
I don't know. I live apart from the world in a cave, so I don't really have any idea.
You wouldn't know.
Just sitting at home, sipping my cold toddies. Writing my little stories.
Minding your beeswax.
Reading my books and watching my movies and minding my own goddamn beeswax.
And your whoopsie-doos.
And Janie doesn't realize it, but this mishap is exactly what she needed to happen. She's been agonizing over what to do about all this. Like, to the point that she's coming apart. As she puts it, she's barely eaten anything in like 2 weeks, so she's basically developing an eating disorder. She can't talk to anybody about it. She's completely alone. Her friends can't know. Reeve knows, but he's a dick and he abandons her because she doesn't do what he wants her to do, so he breaks up with her.
I've known those circumstances.
And her parents are so traumatized over Hannah that they don't know what to do to help Janie because they're so scared to do anything that it might push her away. So losing the letter is like finding the valve that would release all this pressure. For Janie's own sake, this is the best possible outcome. And so the whole story concludes with a cliffhanger involving Reeve's older sister, Lizzie, who is soon to be a lawyer, after Janie gives her a call. Lizzie draws her own conclusions based on the information available. And since this is the final explanation of events, I believe this is what Cooney fully intended to be the real, true story of what happened.
I didn't know we were getting a cliffhanger today. Cave hanger.
Oh, we're getting a cave hanger today. Everything the Johnsons believe is true, except one thing. Janie isn't Hannah's daughter. It was Hannah who abducted Jenny Spring from that shopping center in New Jersey. It was Hannah who took her home to her parents and said, "This is my daughter Jane," leaving the Johnsons to wholeheartedly believe that Janie was their granddaughter. Until now. Now they know everything. And after one hell of an emotional evening, Miss Johnson goes to the phone and dials the number on the milk carton against Janie's wishes. It's this gut-wrenching conclusion because once they pick up the phone, all their lives are going to change forever.
You can't unknow that.
They keep going like, well, let's just do this and tell them and then it's done. Everything's done. And Lizzie's like, this is never done.
It's not how
this
it works.
is never going to be over or go away. And all Janie can do, like a nightmare, is just cry and beg Mrs. Johnson not to call them because she loves her parents, the Johnsons, and she isn't ready for everything to change just yet.
Can't blame her.
But knowing better and trying to be a better parent, Mrs. Johnson hands her the phone. And when Mrs. Spring answers on the other end, Janie says, "Hi, it's your daughter, Jenny." And quite literally, that's all she wrote. The story ends right there.
The end?
The end. Well,
What?
thanks for listening, guys. Rate, review, subscribe.
Thanks for being here.
In the foreword that I mentioned earlier, Cooney says, "I wanted my reader to go on worrying even after the book was over."
Well, thanks for
so
that.
the ending doesn't tell everything.
I don't like that. I'm just going to say the way that she said it, I, as an author, writer, creator, artist of any kind, I would love to have my reader, viewer, listener, dear listener, go on thinking about things that I've written or said.
Sure.
I'm okay with that idea. That sounds lovely. Just to have that in your head, to be haunting you pleasantly, hopefully, if you will, as time goes on. I don't want to make people worry themselves. The use of the word worry, I have a fundamental issue with.
Yes, because you worry about everything.
Yeah. But who wants to introduce more worry to the world?
I think that's just the word she chose.
I think so too. But that's why I'm picking a bone, because
Poor word choice.
I don't think worry is the word. I hope not.
I think she could have easily said, wondering
Wonder.
or whatever.
Ponder. Consider.
Contemplate.
Not worry.
Don't worry, guys.
Semantics, but.
Don't worry, be happy. But she also says, "I never planned to write more about Janie and her boyfriend, Reeve, but I changed my mind." And as a result, The Face in the Milk Carton is just the first of 5 novels in the Janie Johnson series. These books are Whatever Happened to Janie, The Voice on the Radio, What Janie Found, and Janie Face to Face. And there's even an ebook publication of a short story called What Janie Saw that supposedly fits right in between books 4 and 5. And as mentioned before, there was also a CBS TV movie made in 1995, which was a combination of this novel with its 1993 sequel, Whatever Happened to Janie. This movie premiered on May 24th, 1995, and they changed the name Janie Johnson to Janie Jessman, and her real life name was Jennifer Sands, not Jenny Spring. So I don't know why they would make changes like that, but they did.
Okay.
It was a choice. And it was starring Kelly Martin as Janie, who did a lot of fun things with her career, namely voicing Daphne Blake in A Pup Named Scooby-Doo, and Roxanne in a Goofy movie.
Hey, I knew that name. I knew it. I knew that I did.
Roxanne. How
Roxanne.
you doing? Later, she was in one episode of Mad Men, had a recurring role on ER, and co-hosted the pilot of America's Funniest Home Videos alongside Bob Saget.
Wow.
She was like 14.
Oh my God.
Isn't that weird?
That's cool.
Funny stuff.
Rest in peace, Bob.
But yeah, so that's how the book ends.
You've bookended it.
I've bookended the book ending. I don't know. I have a lot of feelings about it too. Like, I want to know at what point she chose not to make her parents like sinister.
Mm-hmm.
Like she, misled the audience, the reader, like you want to do for things like this. That's what you do. But I wanted the reveal to be something just, crazy. I don't like that they were totally innocent bystanders. It's wrapped up in too tight of a bow. It's too pretty.
Yeah. This was a young adult novel, yes.
Yeah, it's young adult. I guess you need to have that for young adult.
It was pretty dark, but it was a young adult novel. So I think she walked the line as best she could.
Yeah.
Like many things that we cover do, like a lot of our Are You Afraid of the Dark episodes do. They kind of wrap it up much nicer than it would be wrapped up in real life.
One of the most beautiful things about young adult literature is it exists to not only remind teenagers that they're never really alone, but to also teach teens the virtue of questioning the status quo.
Mm-hmm.
Reality may be perception, yes, but perception can be, and often is, intentionally skewed by those who have authority over us.
Amen.
From politicians to teachers to role models, influencers on the internet,
camp counselors,
youth pastors,
a la Camp Green Lake,
and dare I say, our parents. Those who are given the right to speak into our lives at a young age usually do so with so much confidence that many of us never question whether or not they're correct or unbiased. Kind of like we said last episode, children are susceptible to believing what other people tell them, especially what adults tell them, and especially when it's lies. So much of the media we've covered on the show leans heavily into that idea that the adults don't always know what's going on. They don't have all the answers, and they don't always have our best interest at heart. Best case, they help the kids figure out what to do. Worst case, they're the ones preying on the children and perpetuating the issue in the first place and the danger. Again, like with holes.
And we've seen examples of both.
The mystery surrounding Jane's identity, which pushes her onto the path of literal self-discovery by forcing her to ask the hard questions like, who am I? No, really, who am I? Makes this book an obvious choice for classroom curriculums and summer reading lists. It's also been lauded as a work that can help young adults with their development of moral reasoning, predominantly because of its themes of questioning authority, navigating difficult or strained relationships, and taking matters into your own hands to figure out what the hell is going on and to do what needs doing, despite being dismissed, belittled, and insulted for refusing to simply go with the flow just to make things easier for everyone else around you.
Mm-hmm.
So in summary, it's okay to question reality, especially when you know deep down something is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Don't settle for complacency. Keep searching. Keep learning. You just might make the discovery of a lifetime.
Snaps.
But hopefully it's not that you were abducted at the age of 3.
Hopefully not that. Hopefully different discoveries about yourself, about others. Connection.
Hopefully all
good things.
Things.
Not that.
That's really all I've got about The Face on the Milk Carton.
What a ride.
What a ride.
I didn't know what to expect coming into this, and it's really interesting that we're finding so many of the same themes that we just talked about, with holes and throughout our pretty dark summer.
I love when all the themes line up. Like, it feels like magic. Mm-hmm. It's all very serendipitous.
Love that serendipity.
And yeah, I never read this book until last week, so I didn't know either.
Wow.
The odds are ever in our favor. Sometimes. On occasion. Rarely.
AKA not ever. And rarely always.
On Cooney's website, there's a page that lists her awards and recognition for The Face on the Milk Carton. And there are a lot of them. But I want to point out the very top award/recognition. Number 29, Top 100 Banned and Challenged Books, 2000 to 2009.
Hey.
For references to kidnapping, cults, challenges to authority, and teenage sexual activity. I just love that that's at the top of her list.
That's the badge of honor that she wears.
She's a woman after my own heart. I love her. It would be on my website would be writer of banned books. It would be like, this is my identity. This is my title.
Do Reeve and Janie get it on?
Mm-hmm.
They do. Okay. You skimmed
there
over
was
that.
So much that I had to pick and choose what to cover. But, I didn't want to make this a 2-part series, but spends a lot of time in her head, thinking about Reeve, longing after him, lusting after him,
yearning.
pining. And when they go to New Jersey on the way home, they're already late. They're already thinking, what are we going to do to tell our parents?
Mm-hmm.
And they both agree. Our parents are going to think that we got a motel room or something and just had sex. And so they agree to go to a motel and just do it.
Whoa.
But they don't. Janie changes her mind because she's not in the right headspace because she just saw her real life biological family, so she's not really into it.
No,
today, Reeve,
that's too
stop
much.
trying to force your own agenda.
Yikes. Okay, yeah.
And
I
also,
don't like him anymore.
Every single time they get in the car to go somewhere, he takes her to Scenic Overlook, also known as Sexual Overlook.
Spot. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. They call it
what do they all
Sexual Overlook. It's terrible.
What do they always
so
call
cringy.
the spot? It's always like the
Lover's Lane.
Yeah, like that kind of thing.
Yeah. Bring in the I think is what's known.
It that.
Here comes the good lovin'. I think that's
God.
The man with the golden hook for an arm.
We know that one.
Things like that. Yeah. The golden hook is a euphemism for losing your hand.
Thank you for spelling that out and then deciding not
losing
to.
your hand and having it replaced by a golden hook. Yeah.
Damn. Well, I don't know. I wondered because we mentioned Hank Green earlier. John Green has been on the banned book list for things like that in young adult fiction. So
yeah, she's pretty unapologetic.
We're all about discussing how these things are developmentally important and appropriate in the right circumstance, and it's the kind of thing where this may be the exposure that a young adult might get to sexuality.
Right.
So there's a lot of responsibility there in how it is presented, but also the reality of how that can sometimes go. How there can sometimes be teen boys pushing their own agenda.
Yeah, he does quite a bit. I don't like Reeve at all.
No, but it's good to see it in that perspective, to be able to look at that objectively and
for sure
parse out for yourself as a teenager what's not okay about that.
Mm-hmm. But like for these reasons, being number 29 on this list, I just want to point out the titles that it beat on the top 100. It beat Goosebumps, A Wrinkle in Time, The Handmaid's Tale, The Lovely Bones, Fahrenheit 451, The Kite Runner, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Slaughterhouse 5, and Brave New World. People thought that this book was worse.
This book was worse than those.
Than all of
wow.
those. Some of the most notoriously challenged books of all time.
Wow.
And this beats them.
Wow.
For a decade.
Well, a bunch of our Darklings have just opened their Amazon tab and they're ordering it.
Yeah. Hell yeah, man. I love it. So, anyway, it's a good time. Kudos to you, Caroline B. Cooney. We love you. Hope you're doing well out there.
Hear.
Go to her website, send her a lovely message, let her know that you're thinking about her.
But no lovely bones.
Yes. Don't mention the lovely bones. Lots of beef between these. I have no idea. I'm joking.
Okay. I was about to say, I didn't know what I stepped in.
I'm stirring the pot.
Hopefully not some lovely bones.
I'm bubbling the cauldron, if you will.
It's at this point in our show that we usually say thank you to some other folks as well.
Yeah.
Our patrons.
Yeah. On Patreon. Patreon.com/TPD podcast.
Nailed it.
Where people give us money to say thank you for doing the show and reminding them
that they're not alone.
That's it.
And you guys remind us of that at the same time. And it's a really beautiful, little, wonderful, symbiotic thing where you guys get fun episodes and access to some fun behind-the-scenes stuff that we always promise to share more of and always struggle to do. But we know that you're there, and it means more than we can express. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's on my to-do list. Big to-do list the next couple weeks.
And we have to shout out our newest patrons, BJ and Whispered195.
Whispered.
We don't often have usernames rather than people's names. So thank you both so much for your contributions to our Patreon. You make it possible for us to keep our flashlights on, keep our batteries running, and keep making this pretty dark stuff.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for being here with us through the pretty dark summer. We hope your back-to-school season is going well, whether you yourself are schooling or you are assisting others in that endeavor. We can't wait because this is, like you said at the beginning, when we are gearing up for the most wonderful time of the year.
It's the most spookiest time of the year.
We're getting all of that prepared for you right now. We've got a few other episodes before then. We've got some more Are You Afraid of the Dark, which I know is exciting for everybody.
We love being back around the campfire.
Some fun surprises, hopefully, before we begin our October marathon.
Dude.
So
I'm so pumped. This is like one of the best transitions from summer to autumn that we've had. And we had a pretty good one last year, so with Watcher in the Woods. I think that was our big transition.
It's when
last
the
year.
Summertime sunshine just gets a little bit muted.
A little bit dimmer.
And you notice that there's just a little bit more of a breeze than there was yesterday.
Woo! Don't get me too excited. I'm going to go to sleep tonight.
Thank you for being here. Dear sweet darklings. We cannot wait to be back in your ears ASAP.
That's right, guys. Thanks for listening. And remember, you're never really alone.
Mm-mm. Not even if you don't know who you are.
Not even then.
Even then.
Look, go to the grocery store, buy a carton of milk, do the gallon challenge, drink the entire gallon, run around the grocery store.
Please no.
If you don't throw up,
your identity is secure.
Yeah, I was about to say, I don't know what you win. I don't know why anybody ever did that. I don't think anybody ever made it without throwing up.
Mm-mm.
It's the only way to find out.
Oh my God.
So get going.
We're giving terrible advice today.
Get the chugging. Guzzle it down.
Bye, guys. Thanks for listening to That's Pretty Dark, written and produced by Christian Baxter Mott and Kaylin Andrews.
Our music is composed by Jonathan Simmons, and our art is provided by Paige Garland at Power Girl Illustration.
Join the collective nostalgia and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at That's Pretty Dark Podcast.
Share your experiences and let us know what shows, films, or villains still haunt you from childhood at that'sprettydarkpodcast@gmail.com. Remember, you're never really alone.
So until next time, sweet dreams, everyone.